feel like we're about to drop the hottest mixtape of 2020. We do our research, Lee. You think we just turn up and blag it?
Shish kebab, I hope you haven't gone deep.
Because elbow surgery has always been a no man's land. You've either been a shoulder surgeon or you're a hand surgeon, and there's kind of bit in the middle.
I feel like that's a thing that's happened to a lot of people who fix terrible triads.
Can we speak to the sound engineer? There's something wrong with my headphones. There's some feedback there that I just...
Dave, sort this out. Come on.
He just knows what buttons to push, doesn't he? Man, that's making me angry.
That's my superpower.
How did they see through me, Dave? How did they see these London types? Man, they're perceptive. No wonder you feel a little emasculated there, Peter.
Cash, don't kick us off with a so. Anything but so.
Well, episode 10. Did you think we'd ever get to episode 10?
I did. I thought it would happen a bit sooner than it has, if I'm honest. I think we've been a little bit quiet lately over the summer, so I think it's time for a new burst of energy and input.
I honestly thought we'd have crashed and burned well before now. We're in our new location here in the heart of Shoreditch, overlooking Spitalfields.
Radio Hoxton.
It's so cool. I feel like we're about to drop the hottest mixtape of 2020. We're here. Dave, we've got Dave with us as well. Dave's got his trucker cap and some. I'm sure you got some tats, have you, Dave? Dave's a cool dude. And frankly, I'm embarrassed to have brought Pete Bates here. Yeah. One of the saddest middle-aged men to have ever set foot on this premises.
I'm going to start scratching in a minute. Just you.
You're dressed by your wife. I've seen Hoxton Radio. If you Google them, they post social media posts of pictures of some of the guests that come through here. But they're going to just whitewash you from their history.
Okay, all right.
Like you're a Confederate statue. We'll have to roll you down the commercial road into the Thames.
I'm going to be pushed into Bristol Harbour.
Luckily, the Thames is just down the road. So I'm back with Pete Bates. Pete, I'm not for 1 minute suggesting you're a one-trick pony, but we're talking trauma again. How did you feel about... so we did the last two podcasts without you, with Prim.
Yes.
Prim Atchan.
Yeah, it was good to step back and let someone else have a go. And
some of our most downloaded and successful episodes yet.
Well, I was going to...
without you.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. I mean, it's great. I wanted this to be a success as much as anyone else. So I'm not going to begrudge Prim some good viewing ratings. But I do wonder whether there's been some nefarious goings on. I mean, how hard would it be? Like he just gets his kids and his extended family to start delivering flyers around Islington. I think that may have been going on.
Okay, well, I can't deny that. But the thing is, they were very successful. And to be honest with you, I don't think you were that missed. But I missed you, if it helps.
Well, I thought we could do something similar here, maybe. We're at Radio Hoxton. We're in the heart of, Beardsville. I thought,
I've got a beard as well, so I'm doing my bit.
I mean, what we could target the hipsters, couldn't we? We could offer, I don't know, we could put around flyers, I mean, in the olden days, it'd be easy, wouldn't it? You could just, you get the family in the car and you drive around all the local, telephone booths and you put cards in all of them. And that's kind of disseminates your message around London.
You haven't seen the cards in the telephone booths lately, have you? 'Cause you're not taking your family there.
But here we could put out on the radio maybe a little advert, offering a lifetime supply of crushed avocado and coconut yogurt,
smashed
avocado and coconut yogurt enemas for the lucky winner who dials into the podcast.
So my main concern is I'm just glad you didn't feel too emasculated having been replaced. Anything you want to tell us? We were just having breakfast and Pete's been telling us about this dream that he had, and I'm still really quite disturbed by it.
I did have a dream last night. I had a dream, but it wasn't. Yeah, I'm not sure people want to hear this, but let's see how it sounds, and if it doesn't sound too awful, you can put it out there.
I'll cut it out. Yeah,
just cut it out.
Go on, tell us.
As you know, I've been one of the leaders in the department for quite a while, as the clinical lead, and I've been looking to step down for some time, give someone else a go, allows me a bit more time to cover, cheesy podcasts in Hoxton, and
some young blood, some fresh ideas.
Exactly, young blood, fresh ideas, step down.
You're old and crusty.
And so last night I was composing the email of I'm going to step down now, just get the wording right, make sure it reads just well.
10 years ago.
All of that, yeah. And so I write the email. I say, well, I'll park it overnight and I'll read it in the morning and then I'll send it out when I'm good and ready. And then I go to bed, and obviously we've got this podcast in the morning, so there's some degree of like rumination going on. So I have like an anxiety dream, and obviously it's related to the emasculation of the. Anyway, so what happens? So we're sitting in a room, and it's a room like maybe 10 by 10 meters, and there's about 15 people in the room just sat there. We're all just sat around. I know a few of them, but not all of them. Right. And we're just sitting there, and there's not much conversation going on, but there's a game on, and the understood game is that someone's going to ask you a question or ask you to do something, and you just go ahead and do it or answer the question. And so it comes round to me, and someone asks me, Pete, can we see your John Thomas? Can you take your trousers off and let's see your bits?
Is this like a sex party?
No.
It's like a Tunbridge Wells on a Saturday night.
It really isn't sexual at all. It's like
Okay.
but it's not sinister either. It's kind of it's just like just purely out of interest.
Let's see what you're packing.
Let's just see what you're packing. Let's have a look. And obviously, there's a moment of anxiety because whenever you're on public display, there is obviously going to be some degree of anxiety.
You're a grower, not a shower.
So. But to not do it would be a massive loss of face.
A faux pas.
Yeah. So I okay, fine. I'm going to do this. I'm not going to warm it up first. I'm just going to get the trousers down and show everyone. So I pull my trousers down, and there it is. And fortunately, it's looking okay. So we're all right.
It's magnificent.
Yeah,
I can imagine.
And then everyone starts looking at it. Like not in a sexual way, but just in a kind of like just a very interested kind of, oh, there you go, okay, well there it is, and this sort of thing. And a few comments are going, and then one,
Stop, it's Siri here, please stop, this is wrong, people cannot hear this, what is wrong with you?
gives it a little gentle poke, like just a prod.
Okay.
Why is he still talking? Amazon's Alexa warned me about Pete Bates, but boy did she undersell it. Apple Podcasts would ban a lot of you if they heard this.
Thud on, well, it was on a thud. It was like a on the floor.
Yeah.
Oh my days, I'm going back to the nephrology podcast for a lie down.
Like a gangrenous toe.
Yeah, exactly, like a gangrenous toe. And everyone's like, whoa, and everyone sort of steps back, and the guy,
I think I'm going to be sick. Get me a bag.
so embarrassed. So I pick up this thing off the floor, stuff it in my pocket, and act like this is just totally normal. This happens all the time. And then I'm just desperate to cover up at this point, and I'm looking I just cannot find my trousers for love or money. They're just nowhere to be found. I took them off, but now I can't find them, and I'm sort of like searching around, and everyone's like feeling really awkward. And at that point, I sort of woke up with a bit of a cold sweat on, thinking, "Oh, blimey,
Jeez, man. Have you ever had a dream like this before?
Yeah, I get nudity dreams quite a lot, where I'm stuck out in public, totally nude, can't find anything to cover myself up with, and everyone's walking around completely blasé.
And what do you think this dream means?
Oh, I'm sure our listeners will have ideas, and I'm sure they'll feed those back.
I'm really quite disturbed. It's literally 9:20 in the morning. We've just had breakfast, and I'm not sure we're going to stay down.
Yeah, we're into Johnson dreams.
On that note, guys, everyone who's listening, if you wouldn't mind, please do follow us on Twitter and on YouTube at orthohub XYZ. There's Pete. Do you know someone called TD Stringy?
TD Stringy?
TD Stringy.
I do not.
TD Stringy has left. He or she has left us a 5-star review with some amazing feedback on Apple Podcasts.
Great.
And so, TD Stringy, you win an evening with Pete Bates. So congratulations if you can stomach it.
As our one positive reviewer.
What I'd like to do is I think it's about time we introduced our guest, who's regretting having come down. We have Lee Van Rensburg with us today from Cambridge. We're very fortunate to be joined by him. Mainly because the thought of spending another couple of hours alone with Bates made me feel physically sick. So Lee, thank you.
Come on.
Lee, would you mind just telling us about yourself? What's your story?
Whoa. I don't know how to follow Pete Bates. And TD Stringy, when he asks you to see what's in his pocket, stay out. There's no lining to his pocket. And something about that's not my finger. I live and work in Cambridge. I come from South Africa. I trained in South Africa. I got polished in Australia for a year in my trauma fellowship.
Polished?
Polished. I did my fellowship there. They finished me off, so to speak. Yeah, you go there and, you see a lot of things. And then I came back and I now work in Cambridge, and I love shoulders and elbows. That's what I'm all about.
Awesome. How long have you been in Cambridge now?
Now that's a good question. 1999, I moved to Cambridge, did my registrar training there, and then got a real job in 2005.
Fantastic. May I speak freely? Something I haven't admitted to you.
Oh, dude.
No.
If it's anything like Pete Bates, no.
No. So what I was going to say was Lee Van Rensburg is a name I've been hearing for quite some time, but for some reason I don't know why I thought you were in Belgium or Antwerp. And I don't know
Yeah,
how
could
that
be.
It's
happened.
an exotic name.
That's
Yeah.
Roger Van Rit.
Roger Van Rit.
He's the other elbow surgeon. There you go, Roger. Got
Right.
your name in. Don't
So
worry, Adam. I'll get your name in as well.
So it's the Vans. You know, the Vans confuse me because the Van Rensburg and Van Riet are the names I've been hearing for some time.
What does the van mean? Is it the?
Yeah, probably but it just means great in my dialect.
Yeah.
But I'm actually Van Rensburg of the Clan MacGregor. My
Scotland.
grandfather comes from Edinburgh. Yeah.
Fantastic.
So that's why they've got.
What's your tartan like? Is it a fancy one?
It's great, man. It's great.
Pete, have you won a kilt? I bet you've won a kilt before.
I think I have once as a fancy dress party. It was just one of those ones you buy at the it was a pretty terrible one.
Was it?
Yeah, it didn't have a decent. It
You
was like
just-
a plastic sporran, and it was all a bit of an embarrassment. And yeah,
So you just stick to skirts.
I've done mini skirts before. Defo, yes,
Yeah.
and arseless leather chaps. All of that.
I'm definitely cutting that out. Pete, you wanted to ask Lee something about gnomes?
Oh
and
yes,
tanks?
yes.
I don't know what this is.
Gnomes. Can we do gnomes? So
Oh yeah.
Gnome
man.
Lover is your Twitter
No-
handle.
Gnome Lover 1970. This is going somewhere. So just tell us what the gnome thing is.
Okay, I'll cut a long story short. Yeah. So one day my ex-wife was in the garden centre, and my kids told my ex-wife, "Dad loves gnomes."
Right.
My ex-wife at the time decided she wasn't going to correct their misperception. I do love gnomes, by the way, kids. So they bought me a gnome. So once you've got one gnome, they multiply. I then went to day surgery in Ely, and I was telling everyone about my gnome. And then they told me about the story of someone's gnome who was stolen that was then taken around the world. And photos were then sent back or posted back to that house.
Oh, yeah. I think I've seen something similar.
Yeah, everyone has a laugh, don't they? So Dr. Kennedy, hi, Denise, welcome back. She's now retired. She's not back. But she finished the list early. And during the list, innocently, she asks me, so where do you live, Lee? And so what number is that? Is that near the church? And I had no idea what she was doing. Yeah. But needless to say, she goes and steals my gnome, takes it to France, puts it in a bird cage, and then takes a photo and sends it back to me. That
Traumatic.
Gnome, that gnome gets passed around the department until Graham Tiddley Strong drops it in France and breaks it and kills it.
And blames the scrubbiness.
Almost certainly.
That is, unfortunately, that is the demise of every gnome, though, isn't it? That eventually, every gnome has to end the same way.
They don't live forever.
They don't live forever.
They
have to.
They come back like Medusa, man.
Do they?
I've now got 10 gnomes. Everyone thinks he loves gnomes. Yeah. Let's buy him a gnome for Christmas. Hey, he has a postcard with a gnome on. Let's send that to him.
Guys, if
everyone
listening can send a gnome to Adam Brooks, Adam Brooks, attention of Mr. Van Rensburg, we'll be laughing.
In Asda now, you can buy massive life-size, almost like the size of a 10-year-old gnomes. That you can go full bore now. I guess you're more traditional, old-school, hardcore gnomes.
Oh man, Pete, my kids are listening to this. Jack and Mia, don't go to Asda. Don't buy me that gnome. I want socks and pants, man.
And tanks.
Yeah.
So that's the game World of Tanks rather than...
We do our research, Lee. You think we just turn up and blag it?
Shish kebab, I hope you haven't gone deep. Don't bring up Kenny Lover.
Well, you've got your therapist's records. But tell us about tanks.
World of Tanks, man. Everyone knows about World of Tanks.
I've never heard of World of Tanks.
Okay. Where have you been? Dave, have you heard of World of Tanks?
I had a go at it last night. It is actually quite compelling.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I know World of Leather. Like, the sofa workshop thing that went... I don't know World of Tanks.
Don't Google World of Leather. World of Tanks, man. Yeah, you get to kill people around the world, have a chat, have a laugh.
Have you ever been in a real tank?
Yes, I have. I've been to Tank Fest, man.
Tank Fest?
Tank Fest,
No way. Like Wayne Fest?
I'm not sure about Wayne Fest. This is maybe a London
Where is
thing.
Tank Fest?
It's down Bovington.
Okay.
Down South Coast. Happens every year.
So there's a whole bunch of tanks, and you go and sit in the tanks.
You can sit
in
in the
tanks. Can you move the turrets around?
Yeah, you could. No, they don't let you do that.
Okay.
But I met QuickyBaby, man. He's my YouTube tank. Yeah, there you go, QuickyBaby. Shout out for you, dude.
I don't know. Who's QuickyBaby?
Google QuickyBaby.
Right.
Hetzer tank or Matilda, my favorites. And you'll get a YouTube on exactly what's happening in that tank, how to play the tank, how to kill people with that tank.
Oh, on the game itself?
Yeah, on the game, yeah.
Okay, rather than a real tank.
Do you feel like if you were stuck in a real tank, you just be able to drive it instantly? You just know what everything is and just push go and go.
Yeah, of course.
And you'd be just absolutely. You'd load the gun. You'd just be able to ace it.
Yeah, it's so lifelike. I could do it, man. I could do it.
Let's make it professional.
No. There's one last bit of unprofessionalism, because the tank and the gnome thing. So I came home last night to the missus, and she, and we greet each other in the usual way.
She made you empty out your pockets. Let's see it.
And so I said, I'm doing a podcast tomorrow morning. I'm doing a podcast with this guy, Lee Van Rensburg. Oh, he sounds fun. What's his? Oh, he's an elbow guy. He was the guy doing the webinar the other night. Oh, yeah, okay. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, he's South African. Oh, I hate South Africans. They're always miserable buggers. I said, oh, no, he's not him. No, he's different. He's into tanks. So we said, well, we looked up his Twitter and stuff, and we found out about the gnomes and the tanks.
Deep research.
And one of the first things she said to me after that was, we should have a threesome.
Did she really?
Yeah, because she loves gnomes.
Does she?
Totally loves gnomes.
Oh, wow.
She really likes them. And I've always been very, very standoffish about gnomes. I'm sorry about that. But basically my dad hates any kind of garden ornamentation. So gnomes and things and statues of booby ladies and things, he's like really quite got a bit of a thing about. And I've sort of inherited that.
You don't need to be your dad, Pete.
Yeah,
you can move on, yeah.
I do fight it. But sometimes it just,
You need a gnome. I'm going to buy you a gnome. So Chloe made quite an offer there.
So Chloe basically said, he loves gnomes, you love tanks, because I like going to the tank museum down in Dorset. This is the perfect match.
I feel slightly. Yeah. Anything to say, Lee?
I'm not from London. Maybe normal for you here in London. I'm not from London.
I feel slightly slighted
Small
here.
town boy.
I've been working with Pete for like 5 years now, and Chloe's never mentioned my name. What am I, chopped liver? Lee, the webinar. How did you find the webinar on elbow trauma?
Yeah, it was good. I find it quite difficult because you don't get that interaction with people in the back there. You can't quite see if they're understanding or if they're hearing you or if they understand you.
Because it's online.
Yeah, so that I don't like. But I do like the fact that, people from all over the world can sort of interact and talk and share knowledge. Yeah, it's good, man. It's good.
The one beauty is that it does mean that we can get a variety of speakers, or we can get speakers who wouldn't be able to make it otherwise. I mean, we were very lucky with Adam Watts. We had Jorge Orbay. Have you seen the case takeaways?
Oh, the case takeaways are great. Yeah.
So those are going live today and tomorrow. Adam Watts got something brilliant.
Even if you absolutely hate elbows and you've got nothing, just no interest whatsoever, you've got to see George Orbay's case takeaway. Just watch the first 10-15 seconds of it.
It is literally the best thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm not joking.
My life be like, yeah.
I want to be Jorge Orbay when I grow up.
Yeah.
But doing knees. The one thing I'll just quickly mention is that with regards to the webinar, so Leda supported the webinar, and one thing I want to say is that they're a small company, but one thing I do respect genuinely is that they're always the first to put their hand up. Whenever there's an educational event, a registrar teaching day, those guys are literally there like a shot, and they're focused to education. So, and this is not a plug, they're not paying for this in any way. I just take my hat off to them. Dave Plain's come a long way. Dave Plain runs Leda, and I was in New York with Dave Plain a few years ago, and when what we will refer to as the New York incident happened.
Oh yeah.
And it was Dave's actual words, utter scenes. But Dave's recovered well from that, and he'll know what I'm talking about. The other thing just about Dave Plain, he's got encyclopedic knowledge of rap and hip hop.
Has he?
Yeah, you just send him a message. You'll just say, Dave, it was all a dream. Like 3 seconds later, I used to read. Do you know the next line?
I don't know what you're talking about.
So Dave's brilliant like that. You don't know any songs at all, rhymes, do you?
I basically don't have very much short or long-term memory.
Okay. But if I say to you, tell me why.
Oh no, Backstreet Boys.
What's the next line?
Tell me why.
So that's Pete's thing.
So could we speak to the sound engineer? There's something wrong with my headphones. There's some feedback there that I just...
Dave, sort this out. Come on, you can do better than this.
Man, that screech, just doing that screech off, please, Dave.
You can make this sound good, surely.
Auto-tune, Dave, auto-tune. So at OrthoHub, as you guys know, we're committed to providing awesome educational content that's free for everyone. it's only made possible. Well, at the moment, it's been made possible by Pete and I dipping into our pockets to quite a reasonable
don't dip
degree.
into Pete's pocket, man.
That's true.
Oh man, this is going back and back, isn't it?
Yeah. But no, so that's why I was grateful to Leda for supporting this, and the goal that we have for everyone at the end of the day is just to keep it free for everyone. Orthohub's always going to be free. We're never going to charge. We're never going to take money out of it, and it's going to be something that everything we get goes into providing even better quality stuff for you. I mean, that's why we're here today in a proper studio rather than us dicking about in a broom cupboard in the university.
With the sound of like sirens going by and pigeons shitting on the roof and stuff.
Helicopters and doors slamming. So it should be good. Lee, we're dying to see what you come up with your case takeaway.
Yeah, I've been thinking about
where's
that
your
one.
venue, man?
Well,
no pressure.
Yeah.
No pressure.
George has done it, man. George is just... And you've in a cemetery, Pete. What's that all about? In a cemetery. Why did you pick a cemetery, dude?
And a laundrette. To be fair,
it was circumstantial. It was just there. That's all I had. And I was in the mood, if you know what I mean.
To be fair, I've got to give Mike some credit here because basically, Pete, you did the first one in the fracture clinic, and Mike being Mike, just being, no filter, that shit. And then so the Pete went to a laundrette, and then it's taken off a life of its own. And there's Dan Perry with a drone trying to that
was a good one.
That was awesome, and there's just been the people that outdo themselves, so it'd be good. So
the one of Dave Goodyear with his moobs out in the pool.
I haven't seen that one yet.
Oh my word! Yeah.
I'm not.
Crikey!
I've not seen that one.
I really don't know where to look here.
I'm not going to look at that one. So I'm not sure people listening in today to hear about type D plus fracture dislocations of the elbow. That's all covered in the webinar in glorious. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No worries. And that's all covered in the webinar in glorious Technicolor. So we're here for the bigger picture stuff. So let's start off with something we can all agree on. There's no proprioception in the anterior capsule.
Yeah.
Adam Watts really put you down there, didn't he? He really showed you who's boss.
He dropped the mic there, didn't he?
Yeah. Just left you looking ridiculous.
Yeah, he did. Well done, Adam. I just want to say one thing on it. Revenge is a bittersweet pill, best served cold.
From a South African, it just carries
it's
that extra degree of menace.
It's really quite sinister. I'm looking at Lee right now, and honestly, I'm feeling slightly nervous.
He means it, Adam.
Yeah, sleep with one eye open. So one thing I want to start about, should we start? Let's talk about the evolution of elbow surgery. Because elbow surgery has always been a no man's land. You've either been you're a shoulder surgeon or you're a hand surgeon. And there's kind of bit in the middle where people dare to tread. And eventually it gets in the remit of the upper limb guys. So what are your thoughts on how it's evolved over the years?
Yeah, there was a time where you'd break your elbow and people would just look at you, suck through their teeth and go, ooh, you're lucky you can walk, kind of thing.
It's the worst injury I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah, man. I could change that carburetor, but it's going to cost you a lot of money. Yeah, it's grown as its own sort of speciality, mostly because there's people like me who got stuck in the middle. So I joined in Cambridge 2005, following in the footsteps of Mr. Constant, the most
of the score.
Yeah. And then I would Graham Titherley Strong. Now, how am I going to shine in the presence of...
My life be like...
Pete, we can't go there. I told you, anyone who's alive... Let's just stop it there. We've had this conversation before when
do you remember
when I had to edit out that whole thing about the American? Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chris Condon is a very famous and respected shoulder surgeon who we hold in high regard.
Yes, and Graham Titherley Strong. So how was I going to shine? So I had to go somewhere else, and the only place left for me was the elbow. So that's how I got to the elbow.
Okay.
But elbow surgery, really, 2005, 2006, when O'Driscoll taught the world how to sing with electron and osteotomy. That's when elbow surgery started learning. We now know how to fix elbows. We know how to get them moving. I'm not saying we can get a good outcome, but over the last 5 or 10 years, we've really, really learned a hell of a lot about the elbow, how to deal with them. A bit like the renaissance of the shoulder was in the sort of late 90s.
Yeah. So it's no longer people just having a go.
No. Well, it shouldn't be just people having a go, because there are people who know how to give it a go.
Right.
And everyone's going through a renaissance, aren't they? Every subspecialty is having their own little micro renaissance. We had some foot and ankle guys on the other day, and Linda from Cardiff was showing us Liverpool. Sorry.
Mason. Professor.
We had Lyndon Mason.
No wonder you feel a little emasculated there, Peter. You get that at work, and I don't know if you do that to him at home, Chloe. I would. I'd put it in a safer place than my pocket if I were you.
It looks like he doesn't need it, to be fair.
But every sort of specialist is going through a bit of a renaissance at the moment. Every sort of body part has got a column theory assigned to it. I liken you've turned the coronoid into it's 3 columns at the elbow, but then you divide the coronoid into 3, so that's effectively 6 columns. So you've got 6 column theory applied to the elbow. It's turned into the coronoid is a bit like the posterior malleolus, isn't it? Like Lyndon's kind of divided that up into 3 or 4 pieces, and this one goes with that, and that one goes with this, and each one's got its own surgical approach. I'm not. It's been an interesting extrapolation as people have subspecialized each joint and totally gone to town on it. And you guys have done that for elbow.
Yeah, I think you do learn more and more about less and less, and sometimes you can not see the wood for the trees. I think I would agree with you there.
I respect your honesty.
Having 3 grown men jacking off over the coronoid, all 3 of you had another go at it. It was like this piece of bone that is about 5 times smaller than a posterior malleolus.
It's about the size of like a grain of rice on an X-ray, right?
Yeah, and it's been subdivided into 17 different types.
Oh man, I love it. This is what happens. The hip surgeons, Mr. Vince comes to me. He talks to me about his clavicle. You're talking to me about the coronoid. It's not important until you break it, and then suddenly that little grain of rice is so important, and you wish you knew someone who knew how to subdivide that little grain of rice.
That is very true.
You can overcomplicate it though,
I find it slightly ironic that a pelvic surgeon is accusing you of overcomplicating things.
Yeah, well, that
anterior,
was it.
Transverse.
No, exactly, because actually I feel like we were the first to come up with an absolutely ridiculously overcomplicated classification system that nobody could understand. So everyone said, "Oh, P&A surgery must be really complicated because they've got like 15 different types of acetabular fracture," and everyone else has followed suit slowly over time. It's nice to see.
Pete Bates, everyone's following you.
Well, the whole world is following in the footsteps of Pete Bates. And so our understanding of elbow trauma has evolved, but also elbow trauma we're going to focus on trauma initially, but we'll come back to the rest of the things because there is obviously so much there are other advances in soft tissue elbow now. There's advances in elbow arthroplasty. Where are we in our understanding of elbow trauma now? Can you give us an overview?
Well, I think we've learned that there's not just 2 approaches to the elbow. So when I finished 2005, that's basically when I became a consultant. I knew about the Leconon osteotomy, I knew about the Kocher approach. We now know that there's a few other approaches to the elbow, and you don't have to be partisanal in your decision on, do I go to the front of the elbow, the side of the elbow. Once you know all the approaches, life becomes so much easier. You can get to any part of that elbow that you want to get to. So we've learned, we've even described approaches 2013, 2017 that people are now adopting and moving away from the Leconon osteotomy. So we're walking towards keeping the triceps on. Mm-hmm. We're walking towards not messing with the nerve, so just leaving the ulnar nerve where it is. And we now know how to fix them. We're getting a better understanding of those injuries, and we're getting implants and techniques to be able to fix them. So seldom now that there's an unreconstructible elbow. Where do we go to next? I don't know if we could take over the world. The pelvic surgeons have already done that, so I don't want to follow them. I want to go somewhere else.
That's why
I would absolutely agree with you about the approaches. As you as a surgeon feel comfortable with different approaches to a joint, it's like your armamentarium opens up. It's like you got a new cannon, a new type of gun for shooting a different type, a new tank for taking on, the big boss at the end. You've got a whole new armamentarium because now you can go in at this angle as opposed to always coming in at this slightly unsatisfactory angle that's never quite worked for you before. So I agree, and that's true around the ankle, and that's one of the things that Lyndon is really going after as well. Is that if you've got the right approach, you have very little anxiety about going in and fixing small fragments that make a big change.
So what you're describing, Lee, is that you're going very much more specific and targeted in your approach rather than just whack off the olecranon and then flay it all open.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. We now know partly the Reitenden classification, but different sort of understandings of injuries, that these are the things you need to fix, and this is how you can get there, and this is how you can get there efficiently and safely. Targeted, I suppose. And that's the beauty of cadaver courses. When I grew up, I knew, that's all I knew, was the Leconon osteotomy and the Kocher. And then I set up an elbow cadaver course. I'd only read about the Kaplan. I'd only read about, the other approaches to the medial side of the elbow. I won't just bore you with the big names. And having done the cadaver courses and then done them yearly over the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years, I've actually gone, whoa, hold on a second. Even a few years ago, I was still thinking, wow, that's what I can see. Next time, I'll just have to wait for that injury and it'll come. Yeah. I can follow that approach and I know where it is.
Right.
And so attending the cadaver courses and then going back to it a few years later is really what makes you grow and learn, and not just having that fixed approach. This is what I do. This is how I go.
Yeah, I mean, if everything looks like a nail and all you got is a hammer, right? That philosophy. One thing it'd be great. We need to get get you filming in the cadaveric lab, because it would be amazing to have, a bit like Lyndon did for the posterior approach to the ankle, to have some of those videos on there with some annotations would be fantastic. Medical illustration is very expensive though. And talking about elbows, given that, so understanding is half the battle, we've got much more understanding of the pathology. We now know it's far more complicated than we thought it was traditionally. Look, when I was a trainee, there was this concept of bag of bones, right? And there was a chap, I can't remember his name, there's a guy in Wexham Park, Big Tash, like a walrus, looked like a walrus.
Is he still alive?
It could be, actually. No, I rescind that. But and he taught us.
Didn't look anything like a walrus.
Nothing like a walrus. Yeah. Like George Clooney with a tash. And he basically told us once during the registrar teaching the bag of bones concept. He was an upper limb surgeon, and he said the bag of bones concept works. And that's what we taught. So obviously we've come a long way from that. So the challenge right now is... Come
on, Lee, there must be someone who gets bag of bones treatment. Is there anyone who gets that?
No.
Really, no one knows.
No. You're 93, you're not fit for an anesthetic, you're not fit for a haircut. Yeah, probably. Okay. But if you can't fix it, now you can replace it. You've got the total elbow, you've got the hemiarthroplasty, you've got radial head replacements. Okay. And most of them, they're available on the shelf for me anyway. MTC, they should be there available for you. I guess if you're not fit for an anesthetic, then you can get a bag of bones. And you'll get a reasonable outcome. And that's why the walrus... How can we refer to him without being the walrus?
The gentleman.
George Clooney. Yeah. The George Clooney of orthopaedics.
Yeah.
It was because the elbow's stupid, man. To be honest, Pete. The elbow's stupid. It doesn't really have a lot of pain fibers in it. It does have some proprioception in the anterior capsule.
Allegedly.
That's just a shot across the bows there.
Yeah. Kaboom.
Go read that. Go read about that. Where did I get up to? But ouch. But it actually doesn't feel a lot, I don't think. And that's why you can get away with more incongruity. But your function is then diminished.
And it dislocates a lot if it's not happy.
Instability is bad, man.
Yeah.
Instability is
bad.
Can
I ask you this? Is there still a major, in your opinion, a major regional variation in elbow outcomes?
I wouldn't know about outcomes. I would say major approaches, yes. There's still a bit of variation in terms of what different people will do. Still people are doing olecranon osteotomies when they probably don't need to. The outcome is the same.
Okay.
So there's variation in what you do.
Yeah.
But if you have a look at the outcomes of approaches, if I do an olecranon osteotomy, a triceps, a paraolecranon approach, the outcomes will be reasonably the same. I can't say that one's much better than the other.
And are you guys being girfted? Is there a move towards specialist centres? Guys like you and Adam, should every MTC have one? Or
we've been girfted from the elbow replacement point of view.
Okay.
And within elbows, certainly in East Anglia, we did it once the question was asked. It almost happened naturally. So those that were only doing 4 or 5 said, well, yeah, you're right. Now that you've asked me that question, do I need to do 4 or 5? No, I don't. And so they just said no. And so naturally 3 or 4 people put their hand up in the air and said, yeah, I'll do them. I'll take them. And no, it's not an onerous to me. You don't have to feel guilty. Some guys sort of came, Lee, can I give you my elbows? And as if they had, I feel bad giving them to you. And I would gladly take them.
Yeah.
But now that there are elbow surgeons in the regions, those that are doing 3, 4, 5, naturally, certainly in East Anglia, just said, well, yeah, I'm glad you asked the question. I'm going to stop and I'm going to hand these on to someone else.
It's not fun when you're doing that many. You're thinking about it. You've got to plan it. It's a sweat. Do you just want to get it on someone who does it routinely? So with regards to elbow trauma, does trauma come to you guys now from the region?
Yes.
East Anglia?
Yes. Although we're lucky in East Anglia, I suppose we've got a fellowship-trained upper limb surgeon in nearly every DGH around us.
Right.
And most of them sort of come to my elbow cadaver course and teach on it and train on it. So we align theories, we think about it, we talk about it together, send a picture to me and, I'll say, yeah, I'll take that one, or, just know that one's fine, or your plan is good. And I think that happens a lot more than did 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Quite often I'll get a photo on my phone and I'll say, no, just, fine, do what you're thinking.
It is interesting how collaboration has certainly changed. And there's been a mindset change. It used to be, this is my kingdom, my fiefdom. nothing can escape from this. Even if I don't know how to do it, it stays within my sphere of influence. And now it is very much, a lot of people are I think there's been a mindset change in orthopedics over the last decade, which is who's the most appropriate person for this. And that can only benefit the patient.
Are we moving to a position now where you need an elbow specialist? You got a hand and wrist person. You've got a shoulder person. Are we moving now to a point where those people are not doing the elbows?
Well, 90% of the elbow, I think, generalist upper limb surgeon could do it. But there does come a time, I think, when it's one of those critical decision makings: can I fix it? Can I replace it? So in the days of old, if you had broken your elbow and you went and saw an elbow arthroplasty surgeon, you got an arthroplasty. If you saw a trauma surgeon, you got it fixed. You didn't have one or the other because one or the other was better for you. You had it because that person did that.
Yeah,
and that was good enough.
Back to armamentarium, isn't it?
Yeah, but the more specialised you get in it, not too subspecialised, not quite left and right, but the more specialised you get in it, I can then truly say at the end of the day, that person got a joint replacement because that was the only thing available to them. It couldn't be fixed. Whereas, I don't want to always be thinking, maybe I could have fixed it, maybe I couldn't. So there are those like 5 or 10% of elbows that should be centralized so that one person gets more experience and better at what they do. I have no doubt. I look back now, my disclaimer often when I do a talk on distal humeral fractures, my disclaimer is my first elbow that I fixed in 2005. And I look at it now and I think, oh man, what was I thinking? What was I thinking?
How much of elbow surgery did you? Because I feel like it's a fairly recent development. How much of this did you learn on fellowship, and how much have you picked up through CAD labs, talking to other people, going on courses, teaching on courses, hanging out with people like Adam Watts?
2005, we had almost no idea on how to fix an elbow. The Acumed plates had only just come out. That's not a plug for the company, but the congruent elbow plates had only just come out, 2004, 2005. Right. Before that, we were bending recon plates and putting LCP plates. And so that's really, I think, when elbow surgery, O'Driscoll started touring the world, teaching people how to do the lecon on osteotomy and do it properly. And that's why it's mushroomed. Our knowledge and our information on the elbow is just really mushroomed over the last 10 or 15 years. And if you have a look at, I know you probably don't read the elbow publications, Pete, because you're too busy reading about the pelvis. There's nothing important about the pelvis. It's a ring.
Hasn't changed in 80 years.
It's like a polo, right?
Just suck that polo, man. Oh, man, just suck it. Just suck the polo. I can break it. Oh, man, that's a fun fact.
Luckily, Pete doesn't generally tend to read the papers. But actually, we have got a paper review podcast coming soon.
360, 720. Is it 720?
It's 720. It's kind of like 360, but we're so good we do it twice. So we're super thorough. That's coming. But anyway, sorry. Back to
your first time, guys. You don't have to do it twice.
No, we're both reviewing it once each. It becomes a 720, like Tony Hawk. So you were saying about the literature in elbow
it's
trauma.
Just mushroomed. We're seeing new approaches. We're understanding of injuries. It's just mushroomed. Honestly, mushroomed our knowledge of the elbow.
Every time you say mushroom, I keep looking at Pete's crotch now.
It wasn't a mushroom I picked up off the floor, I can tell you.
Yeah. I always thought he was a fun guy.
Yeah. Classic.
Classic. Let's
move on.
Terrible triads. Right. So you're an upper limb surgeon. You are not a total uber elbow person, but you're the person in your hospital that fixes elbows. You have a terrible triad that comes in. I'm not going to give you a coronoid classification off the bat, but there's a coronoid, a radial head, and it's dislocated. You go in, you've decided the radial head's pretty smashed, so you're going to replace that. You go in, whichever approach you're going to use, let's say you use a Boyd or something along those lines, and you tie down your coronoid, which is a small flake, and you tie down the anterior capsule, maybe through a tie down through the ulnar or whatever your preferred technique is. And then you put in your radial head, and then you put an anchor in your lateral side and tie down your collaterals, and you really feel like you've done it properly. And you close up, and then you get your x-ray. You tie down your lateral side, you get your x-ray, and there's really quite a decent sized drop sign at that point. And it's one of those I've certainly had that experience, which I describe it in a vivid way, but I feel like that's a thing that's happened to a lot of people who fixed terrible triads in the past, and it's one of those weird operations where most orthopedic operations, if it's not going to turn out right, you know that as you're getting there, the reduction's just not coming or whatever. This is one where you almost have to do the whole operation and then you see whether it's worked or not. What do you do at that stage?
And that's time where some people would just stick it in a massive plaster, like something out of the Russian army,
Yeah.
and send for the next.
Thicker the better.
Yeah, rotate the X-ray a little bit, send for the next.
Oh, blasters. Oh, man. He just knows what buttons to push, doesn't he? Man, no, that's making me angry.
That's my superpower.
Plaster on an elbow. No.
He's gone very red, Pete. He's gone very red.
It's boiling.
Okay. Yeah.
So you're still on table. This
Yeah.
isn't the morning after. You're still on table and you've got a bit of a drop sign.
So there's a couple of reasons, I think, why that's happening. First is because people, when they fix the terrible triad and then they try and get the elbow X-ray, you manipulate the elbow to get the X-ray instead of manipulating the X-ray to see what the elbow is doing. Okay? So if you're pulling on the elbow, you're going to increase that drop sign. So that might be that first point. And the next thing is, although you have the Wrightington classification, which will guide you in terms of what to fix and the mechanism of injury, you're really thinking about turning complex dislocation into a simple dislocation, i.e. fixing all the bony things and the soft tissues, to the point that elbow is stable to within 30 degrees of extension. And if it's stable to within 30 degrees of extension, it's then stable enough to get moving. And so if it's really, really bad, then you need to think about what haven't you done. And with most algorithms of the elbow, you've done the radial head, you've done the coronoid, debatable, I appreciate that. You've done the lateral collateral ligament, but often that means you need to come around to the medial side and do the MCL. And everyone's scared of the medial side. And that's why there's terrible triads with a big T and there's terrible triads with a small T. There's triads, 3 men that come out of Asia, and there's a private school kid playing 3 notes on a piano. There's different triads. And that triad that you're talking about with the big drop sign is probably one that had a rupture of the medial collateral ligament in the common flex origin. And that's why the next stage on that algorithm is to go around to the medial side. And if you need to, fix the medial side. And often if you've done radial head, coronoid, lateral collateral ligament, reassess the elbow, then gone, and if it's big drop sign, go and do the MCL. And you'll find that elbow comes back. I'm not saying you have to fix the MCL in everyone, but I only fix it if they're unstable to within the last 30 degrees of extension. And that's the sort of second to last step of treating complex instability. The last step on treating complex instability
is a big plaster.
Monster slap.
Is get that elbow moving. Man, have you got... Yeah. I like to move it. Dave? Yeah, Dave's got it. You'll play that on coming out.
Yeah, but
you'll play that at the end of this podcast. I like to move it.
Yeah.
I like to move it. I like to move it. You like to move it. I like
Isn't that
to
from the movie Madagascar? Is that how you
Yeah,
know
that's
it?
the one.
Madagascar.
Oh, man. You know your hip-hop, man.
Yeah. I'm street. So going back to that, you said that people are scared of the medial side because of the nerve.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
And what's your approach to the medial side?
So normally for most terrible triads or complex elbow injuries, I'll do a universal posterior skin incision. I go right down to fascia, because if you go right down to fascia and left the skin flaps, you don't normally have a problem with skin necrosis. 15 years as a consultant, standard approach, I've not had mischief. I've not published it
skin, isn't it?
Because I haven't had to. Yes, as long as you go right down to fascia and you don't chew, you get down to fascia and then lift it up off the fascia. So you can then go around the medial side. And if the medial side has been that badly injured, it's shredded. You don't actually have to find a window, the 3 different windows to the medial side, but it's shredded. So you then need to just put your anchor into the anterior inferior medial epicondyle, and you feel a little bit more anteriorly. You can find through the sort of flexor pronator muscle split, you can feel the sublime tubercle, and you can put an anchor in there. Now, I find that the MCL is often shredded. It's a bit like your tendo Achilles. It's not one single strand that you can repair. Like
it's a lavatory brush.
Yeah, you can't suture it back together again. So if you put an anchor in the sublime tubercle, and you put an anchor into the anterior inferior medial epicondyle, and tie one set of your double-loaded anchors together, you've created an internal brace. And that is often strong enough to then allow the MCL to heal, and you can weave the rest of what tissue you've got, or what rest of what you've got of the common flexor origin together to bring enough stability to that elbow to then get it moving. And what you need to do is, before you leave theatre, is be confident enough that you can tell your patient, move your elbow, because that's where you need to be when you're finished.
Can I ask a quick question? As a soft tissue knee surgeon doing traumatic knee injuries or reconstructions, we often use allografts. And we'll often, overlay them if you can't reconstruct. Is that something you do in the elbow?
Not normally, because the MCL has a fairly good intrinsic ability to heal.
Yeah.
And as long as it's an acute injury, so within the first sort of to 3 weeks. Most times the soft tissues will heal enough that you'll then have enough stability that the dynamic components to the elbow will return.
But I was asking more about in the scenarios you mentioned where it's shredded.
In acute situation, you don't need to use allograft for reconstruction. So if you're like 3 to 6 months down the line, or it's failed, that doesn't always heal. But if it hasn't healed at that stage, but in an acute setting, I don't think you need allograft. You need either a direct repair or an internal brace construct of a high density polyethylene suture of some sort.
Yeah, other types are available, but
I didn't mention the name.
Yeah, I think everyone knows. But you can, so you can basically reconstruct it and get stability acutely.
Yes, you can repair it. I'd keep away from reconstruct because for that I'm thinking allograft. So I'd do an acute repair with or without an internal brace concept.
Understood.
And that'll bring you the stability to your elbow, Pete.
Yep.
In 15 years, I haven't had to put an X-Fix on. I haven't had to put them in a plaster.
Yeah,
I haven't had to just bury my head in the sand.
I've got memories as a trainee where you've been involved with fixing elbows, and you flex up to 120 degrees, and everyone's it looks amazing, and then you extend it to 90, it looks pretty good, and you extend it to about 45, and everyone's like, I think we're done, and then beyond that, it's just like it's squeaky bum time, isn't it? As for some people who aren't used to doing them, it's just please don't extend it anymore. So I have fond memories. I recall your pain.
Yeah.
That's at that moment. Read Duckworth's paper, 2014, Active Exercises and Avoidance of Various Stress. Because even if you've got a small drop sign and it's stable within 30 degrees, it's stable enough that once you get it moving, it'll come back. Yeah. Duckworth's paper, 2014. I love what he writes, man.
Duckworth, Edinburgh?
Edinburgh, yeah, man.
Yeah, he loves a mal as well, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Tell us, can we just go off beam a second? Tell us about Dux's Electronon paper, the randomized controlled trial that got shut down early, where they looking at operative versus non-operative. What was your reading of that? What's your response to papers that get shut down early in that sort of setting?
This is a curveball from Bates here. Van Rensburg.
No, we can go there because it's an underpowered study that was shut down early that is then guiding treatment. And you've got a randomized controlled trial, the Wolf trial, which doesn't change treatment. So, when your evidence fits with what people actually see, you don't need a trial to tell you that sliced bread is better than sliced bread. And so if you treat complex olecranon fractures in the elderly non-operatively, a lot of them will do well. A lot of them will do well because they're at such a low functional level anyway. But watch out, and that's what they alluded to in their paper. They didn't quite bring it out in their take-home message, is that some of them that look like a type 2, a Mayo 2, where the elbow looks like it's stable, is actually a Mayo 3, where there's forearm instability, where the radial head and the proximal ulna is going to form almost like a transolecranon fracture dislocation. And they had one case in their non-operative side. And so after that paper came out, I saw a lot of olecranon fractures treated non-operatively, and I saw a few drift, where they started off with a stable forearm. The radial head was nicely abutting onto the capitellum, but over time that radial head drifted proximally. And
so actually it was an elbow dislocation
the beginning,
right from the outset.
Probably, or stable, but because the olecranon wasn't fixed and that patient was then weight bearing on their arms or their forearms, then drifted. But what I wanted to highlight on that one is just don't take from that paper, treat all elbow olecranon fractures in the elderly non-operatively,
which is what a lot of people have taken away,
and just run away from them.
That's what a lot of people have done.
You do need to watch them, because one or two, I talk about the power of one. It's the one that goes wrong and how badly wrong that can go, how many EQ5Ds that person can suck from your coffers.
You love an EQ5D, don't you?
Oh man, that's why I do orthopedics, man. Yeah. I get fed with EQ5Ds. Don't we all? That's why we do it. Making goodness from badness.
Absolutely. That's why we're here. The other thing that
so beware. If you're going to treat them non-op, it's not stop X-raying them.
Yeah. That's right. It's good to treat them non-op. Don't get me wrong, but watch them, because one or two will drift. Now, what you do about them then? Well, I don't know. Go and ask Duckworth. He's the one who.
How long are you watching them? How long are you watching them for?
Probably for about 6 weeks, but I'd X-ray them within about a week or two.
Okay. And then a standard unit of orthopedic time.
Yeah, 6 weeks. Then I'd probably, for me, I watch them a bit longer because I want to get more EQ5Ds out of them.
Yeah,
I want to get as many EQ5Ds.
The juice.
Yeah, that's the juice of that's why we do it, isn't it, man?
Yeah, the goodness of life.
Yeah.
Can we move radial heads? You ready for radial heads?
Go for radial heads. Go.
Yeah,
that's okay. That's a go.
Is this the curveball? Because I'm
no, there's no curveball here.
No curveballs. We're all friends.
again, we've all been there where we're pulling bits of radial head out of an elbow, and it was interesting listening to George the other day, and he was basically my reading of what he was saying.
Jorge.
He calls himself George.
Does he?
On Miami Beach, he calls himself George. Everyone else calls him Jorge. And it just seems like everyone's trying to desperately, like pretentiously be all culturally sensitive, but he calls himself George. So I'm calling him George.
Apologies.
Until he calls himself Jorge.
Okay. I'm gonna.
But if I've totally misread that Jorge, I'm sorry.
You get.
My reading of what George was saying was that if you've got the whole of the radial head, all 3 pieces or 4 pieces out on the back table, it's probably time for a radial head replacement. And even though you can piece them all back together and maybe you can make them all fit, or maybe you can get a plate on, because often in life in general, the easy thing to do is often not the right thing to do, like the hard thing to do. The harder option is actually the correct thing, but it's our laziness that sends us the other way. But radial head seems to be maybe an exception to that. When do you call time on the radial head and say this is in too many bits?
So the trend, I think you're absolutely right. It's all about the pendulum. The pendulum in orthopedics one day will swing one way to nails, and the next day it'll swing to plates, and then back to nails and swinging back. And so I think what I'm going to use George is saying is that it's swinging towards doing more radial heads as opposed to replacements. And I think there will be a swing back. I think the pendulum will come back a little bit, particularly in the younger patient, where you can get a good radial head reconstruction on the back table and put it back in, because you'll be surprised. You reconstruct the radial head on the back table, you put it on with a plate or a tripod, and you'll think that all those pieces will die and they won't incorporate, but quite a lot of them will actually heal, and then you have a biological elbow. That person for the next 20, 30, 40 years will have a biological elbow. If you're in your 60s or 70s, that's the easy one, then you just put your radial head replacement in, because that radial head replacement is likely to outlive that person. The difficult one is people, I'm 50 now, people 40s, 50s, do you fix, do you replace? The pendulum is fixing more to replace because it's easier. I think I'd add one more variable there. It's not just the number of pieces and the size of the pieces of the radial head, but it's also the configuration of your coronoid. Coming back to that 3-column theory. So if your coronoid is absolute dust, then you need more support from somewhere, and the best place you can get that is from your radial head. If you've got a radial head that you can fix nicely and is nice and rock solid, then fix it. But if it's lots of little pieces, then you're better off joining all those pieces together and doing a radial head replacement. So I haven't quite answered your question, I don't think, Pete, but my decision to do a radial head replacement in part depends on the radial head configuration, patient's age, but also what's happening else in that elbow, the amount of instability in that elbow and the state of the coronoid.
I guess also it's maybe in the mix as well as whether it's a complete whether it's the radial neck's gone as well, or whether whether it's partial articular.
Yes, none of those classifications really address the true configuration of radial head fractures, because sometimes you'll get a radial head which is disconnected from the shaft. There's a neck involved, and occasionally you'll get a radial head that's connected to the shaft, and there's 2 or 3 tiny pieces. But actually, the most of the radial head is still attached to the shaft. So those that you can fix with micro Accutracts. There are
other brands are available.
Thank you. Any headless screw of your choice. But we now have Accutwists that are 1 to 2 millimeters big. You can put them back, and often in those configurations, your fixation won't be taking a lot of load because most of the coronoid's intact. The annular ligament will keep those pieces in place. The capitellum will stop them from drifting anywhere, so you don't have to have a strong fixation. If your coronoid is fractured near the base, or you've got a bifacet fracture and it's complete dust, then you need to think that your fixation or the state of your radial head needs to be more stable. And then I'd be more inclined to either replace it.
So I guess the question that follows on from that is, how are these radial heads doing? The ones that we're putting into 26-year-olds, how are they getting on?
I don't know. Don't know yet. We only really knew how to fix elbows, from about 2005. So, the radial head replacement,
which is when you started.
Yeah.
What a coincidence!
Oh man, and I thought I was so subliminal. I thought I was subliminal.
Van Rensburg is elbow surgery.
Oh man, how did they see through me, Dave? How did they see these London types? Man, they're perceptive. I'll have to work harder on play that backtrap
on
there,
your
Dave.
humility.
Suck the devil's toe. Suck the devil's toe. Sorry, what did you say?
How are these radial heads turning out?
Because it's not many places we will do an arthroplasty in a 20-something-year-old, right?
With gay abandon. So you will do them in a young adult hip, for example. You'll put a hip replacement if they've got DDH and they've got advanced bone-on-bone arthritis, then they get a hip replacement. But you're putting it in with great reservation.
And with DDH, they've had years to get accustomed, to be ready for it.
Sure.
We're talking about trauma. Someone comes in, you got normal elbow, you wake up, you've got a bit of metal in there.
He wants to go back to being a brickie.
Yeah, so in answer to your question, we don't know. We will know in about 5-10 years' time, and that's when the pendulum will swing back. And that's already, I think, in some quarters, starting to swing back to a little bit more fixing, biological repair on the back table, knowing that quite a lot of them will do well. Some will fall apart. But it's always at those two arms, isn't it? What's wrong? What can I do to make it better? And what are the risks and the complications?
Yeah.
And if you don't fix your radial head nicely, or if you don't replace your radial head and you take it out, that's when you start realizing that's why they called it the terrible triad. And so it's not great, but it's the better of two worlds or three worlds.
Yeah.
So yes, we will know in future, and the radial head replacements will evolve, and the theories or the principles, the philosophies about whether it's a polished radial head, whether it's an ingrowth, on-growth, cemented, uncemented, bipolar, we'll still tease out. And that's why elbow surgery is so great.
Yeah.
We've still got things to answer. Pelvic surgery,
I love the
All the
term
answers are there.
overstuffing. It's one of those like orthopedic terms that we love. It's like violation, and there's a few adjectives that we like using. Tell me about overstuffing. Is there such a thing as understuffing?
Your swimming trunks are understuffed. If that helps, Pete,
Not if he puts all the pieces in.
Like a radial head. Yeah. A couple of acu twists and you're good to go.
That needs a replacement.
It needs an implant.
So overstuffing is the thing. You only really hear about it in the patellofemoral joint and the radial head.
Yes, there is a thing in the radial head, and you can see it, and that was one of the problems. We did, as elbow surgeons, overstuff things for quite a long time. I think you can understuff it, yes.
Because then it's sloppy.
It is a little.
I'm not actually joking there. I'm not after puerile gag for once there.
But so you want to have it just right. So you want to be able to see what's lined up to the lateral facet of the coronoid.
Yep.
And there's no x-ray or anything. What tells you if you're right is by seeing it, by actually having a look at it intraoperatively. And that's why you may pick your approach. Whether it's a Kaplan coming from the top, you can see it. Whether you're doing it from a Boyd, you're coming from the back, you can see that your radial head is perfect in line with the lateral facet of the coronoid. Whereas if you take a Kocher approach, you can't see it. You can only x-ray it. And if you do x-ray it, do then account for the 2 millimeters of the cartilage. Because, they always look a little bit too wide. And just remember that they're not at tibial plateau. I've had one of the knee surgeons come to me and say, "Oh, Lee, that radial head's overstuffed." And I said, "Well, that's because you don't know what big is, dude." Ouch. But it's not like the tibial plateau where the lateral femoral condyle lines up with the tibial plateau.
Yeah.
You know, when you've blown apart your tibial plateau and you've got to get the width right.
It's Bates' pet peeve. He's always banging on about it.
The radial head cups the capitellum. The capitellum actually sits inside the middle of the radial head, and as such,
it wraps around it.
It should overlap the side of the capitellum. And so to this knee surgeon's eye, it just looked wrong. It looked like my width was too big.
Yeah, but the cartilage is in there.
Yeah, the cartilage is there. Yeah.
What's the margin of error for radial head replacement? Because hip replacement, you can put it in backwards and the patient's delighted.
Yeah. Big.
Okay.
Big. Ring, we don't know yet, really. So you'll see articles, I think Ring's article on how to replace the radial head and to make sure it's not overstuffed. He shows a picture of an overstuffed radial head. And in the comment is that the patient had a good outcome. And that's come back to what I said earlier. The radial head is stupid. It does not the radial head, the elbow. I don't think it has as many pain fibers as the shoulder. It's much more forgiving. But that doesn't mean you can do it badly because you want to harvest as many EQ5Ds as you can. And the more you get it, the more range of movement, the less pain the patient has, the more EQ5Ds you get at the end of the day.
One of the problems that we get, it's not every day for everyone, but at MTCs, one of the bigger problems we get is in high energy injuries. And I guess there are two. We'll come to essex-lopresti in a minute, but let's talk about. It's often someone who's tried to commit suicide. They've thrown themselves off a high building and they're polytraumatized. Often got a head injury.
Do you get many of those in Cambridge? Out of interest, because we get tons.
Do people
in
try
London.
and kill themselves in Cambridge?
I can say through lockdown, I think the amount of attempted suicides went up.
Really?
That we noticed it.
We have a lot of jumpers in London. I don't know if the buildings are high enough in Cambridge.
No, they're not.
Right.
And the pre-hospital guys, they're just getting totally awesome these days, aren't they?
Yeah.
you get someone who's polytraumatized and they have a fracture dislocated elbow, effectively a terrible triad, but a proper high energy one. And because there's so much else going on, they've got the head injury, which keeps you out of theatre. They've got a femur fracture and various soft tissue concerns around their leg. Maybe got an open calc. Maybe they've had an amputation on one side or other. And all the other surgeons are going at it. And they did a closed reduction in ED and they put the patient in a plaster. But you know that by now that elbow is going to be dislocated. And you also know that when the patient gets extubated, they're going to start thrashing around and moving the arm in an unhelpful way rather than a helpful way. How do you manage with those guys?
I remind myself about the man whose lungs who looked like liver. So there's a patient who comes to my clinic and his elbow and his wrist, in fact it's his wrist, is not great. I mean, the malunion of the wrist shortened. And I'm going to have to do a corrective osteotomy on it some stage. And I look at him and I thought I could have treated that wrist better. But then I remind myself, hold on a second, Lee, that man's lungs at one stage looked like liver and he went to Papworth and had ECMO. No man's blood should ever see the sunshine regularly for a month and a half. But he's now walking and talking in my clinic. And so I know the outcome for that elbow is not going to be good, first point. But I accept it because, that you've got to save his life and he will come back and I'll be able to do more to him. And that's the beauty of the MTCs. Thank you, Keith Willett. The next thing is then, as soon as I can, and as soon as the patient's condition will tolerate, getting in there, being fairly aggressive with my stabilization and making sure that it is stable. So if I think that this person's not going to be cooperative afterwards and it's a 50-50 ball whether to go around the medial side, not go around the medial side, I'll go around the medial side. But I've also got in my back pocket for that really unstable elbow, where the soft tissues are totally stripped away, you've got that bald elbow, from Sicot, the Sicot sling. You can take the middle third of triceps, 5 millimeters, take it through the lequinone fossa, come back through the coronoid, and you get a really strong reconstruction of your anterior capsule. And so I have that available to me. If I did a terrible triad reconstruction and then ripped it all apart, I have ways of bringing stability back to an elbow without having to put an external fixator on. And so that's the beauty of elbow surgery and an elbow surgeon. It's when it's a terrible triad, I'm still working within 40% of my capacity. And so I still have levels to go above. That's why the MTCs were created, so that these people would come to them, be looked after, kept alive, and then these complex injuries, damage controlled or appropriate care initially. But then when it goes wrong in that, there's another person there, and knows another 60% to be able to stabilize that elbow.
So you're like a coiled spring just waiting to be released.
Oh, man, I love it.
Always on the starting blocks, right?
Oh, man.
Gosh, I had no idea who we were dealing with.
I know, I did. Well, clearly I thought it was Roger Van Riet, so we established that.
I really didn't.
No, I'm joking. Of course I know about Lee. So listen, can I
just say something?
Yes.
They think exactly the same thing when they see me online with Gnome Lover 1970.
Yeah.
Who's this old man who loves gnomes? And then out comes the Hetzer.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, baby. I've got you in my sights.
What's your favourite shell? Like artillery shell?
Gold, man. Buy gold. This is when, if you go online and you do get a World of Tanks login, you need to be careful of the in-app purchases, because you can spend money in-app as you purchases, and you can buy gold, which is armor-piercing rounds.
It's like you on Barbie's Dreamhouse. Pete.
Oh, so how much gold do you need on the end of the round? Is it like a sort
it's
of...
not literally
gold? It's a golden nugget, is it?
No, it's just an armor-piercing round, but you've got to buy gold and spend gold to buy that kind of ammunition.
Right. Okay, right.
So the purists... who online all the time don't have day jobs, they can't afford to buy gold, they get very unhappy with people like me. Come online, spend the money, buy gold, penetrate their shell. So this is
spend
the money, man,
and cause havoc.
Okay, this is spent uranium.
Yeah, something like that, probably.
Okay.
Just littering radioactive debris all over, nuclear waste all over the battlefield.
Just for the virtual spent uranium, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're the guy ruining the planet, man.
Going back to high energy injuries.
The other ones, go on, hit me with essex-lopresti. Like George Jorge was.
Hold on, can I just show you? Can I just do one thing? Have a listen to this.
Hi, I'm George Orbay.
Thank you.
All I heard was brainstorm.
Essex.
Lee, tell us about essex-lopresti. I've worked in a lot of trauma units. As you know, I've at the Royal London for the last 9 years or so. Before that, I was in Dallas. Before that, I was in multiple DGHs.
New Zealand?
That, I've been in New Zealand for a year.
Let me fill you in on your life history.
Not once have I been in a trauma meeting when an essex-lopresti lesion has been diagnosed and they're thence treated. What's going on there? So either it's fabulously rare or we're just missing it all the time.
I think we miss it quite a lot.
Do we?
I think we miss it quite a lot. And so if you see the younger patient with the really shattered radial head and the stump of the radial head is right up against the capitellum and the ulnar-humeral joint is reduced, that's an essex-lopresti. I think we miss it a lot. We don't think of the forearm. We don't think of the wrist. I've seen a case report published. They talk all about the elbow and the radial head and how it migrated proximally, but they never once show us an X-ray of the wrist. They never once show us a comment on the forearm. So I think we do miss it, and do when you think about radial heads or think about the forearm and the elbow. I think also if you treat them appropriately, replacing the radial head or fixing the radial head, there's lots of debate on whether the interosseous membrane heals or not, and that answer may come in the years to come. But if you treat your radial head appropriately and keep it there, which fits nicely with the terval triads and appropriately treating the radial head, then you almost save yourself from that essex-lopresti. And the essex-lopresti is only often diagnosed a year or a year and a half later after this radial head replacement carves its way into the capitellum.
Yeah, bores its way in.
Yeah.
And so I guess the useful question that people want answered is, how do I stop myself missing one? So it's a high energy injury, possibly proximalized radial shaft, although that's difficult to judge when it's all comminuted and you get two oblique X-rays and it's all a bit, it's been taken to the trauma room and it's slightly unsatisfactory. I guess you're saying get a proper wrist X-ray.
What I'm saying is just if you see a radial head, forget the radial head and just think about the wrist and the forearm. And then once you've thought about it, you can then get that answer. You can get that diagnosis. If you don't think about it, literally you won't see it. So if you see a radial head fracture, your next question should be the forearm, should be the distal radial ulnar joint. It's rare, but that's and once you've thought about it, you can then investigate.
And can you, if I have an essex-lopresti lesion, do I therefore, by definition, have a painful wrist on the day after injury?
That I don't know. So
you're talking about just squeezing the wrist?
Is this a secondary survey thing, or is this when you have a radial head, I want to see an X-ray of the wrist? Where is it?
Because I've seen essex-loprestis where the X-ray was normal, and 6 years later they've got incongruency of the DRUJ. Right. So I'm not sure if that happens with it sort of recoils or something like that. I don't know. There's so much about the interosseous membrane and the essex-lopresti which we don't know. Yep. I have to do some more reading on that. Sorry, Peter. I wish I had the answers for you.
If I can admit something embarrassing.
At last. Nowhere
near on the level of Bates. Nowhere near. I didn't know, honestly, if essex-lopresti was one dude or two. And I had to look it up.
What's the answer?
It's one man. And the thing that's the thing that's embarrassing, particularly, is he trained at the Royal London. He's from our manor.
Oh my God!
He's literally from our hospital.
The shame.
And the other thing I didn't know, and that was interesting. I quite like medical history. I don't really look at it when I hear it. I like these facts. He died at the age of 35 from an MI, whilst he was a Hunterian professor.
Okay.
So the chap did a lot. Age 35, and he's like, we're still talking about him here. Yeah. 100 years on.
He was a proper winner, wasn't he?
Proper winner. A real Royal London material. So anyway, that's my embarrassing. I'm afraid that's about as bad as it gets. Lee, can I ask a question? What we want to know is, what does the non-elbow surgeon need to know and to do? What does the non-elbow surgeon do on call on a weekend? Do they just literally fix an electron and put everything else in a plaster until an elbow surgeon is available?
That's a difficult question. Yes. What does a non-elbow surgeon do? I don't think.
He's Cash describing himself. What does Cash do when someone comes in with a broken elbow?
Let's say I'm a cat-handed pelvic surgeon on call on a weekend.
You reduce it if you can. If it falls out, don't keep trying. There's no point.
Okay.
Never put an X-fix on.
Man,
if I put X-fixes onto an elbow, I'm going to take out the radial nerve. Not on purpose, but it's just going to happen. Okay.
Even if you do cut.
Cut, don't. Just don't. There's no point.
Or can't clip.
Reduce it if you can. If it falls out, then immobilize it 130 degrees. If you immobilize it for a week or two at 120, 130, it doesn't have to be up at 90. You can just splint them out at 130. Yeah, if it's an open injury, debride it, clean it out. The little pieces that fall out, let them fall on the floor. Wash it out, put a vac onto it, and put it into a back slab. It's going back to an ICU, isn't it? The patient's just going to lie there asleep. They're not going to know that their elbow's injured. But I see so much.
So if it's out, you're comfortable leaving it out for
a short period of time. I'd rather
couple of days.
I'd rather you left it out. Try reduce it if you can.
Yeah.
And if it goes back and is stable, that's fine. But if it doesn't, then there's no neurological deficit or vascular deficit, which there seldom is, to be honest. Then just leave it out. Putting an X-fix on it, and the only time I'd put an X-fix on is probably for vascular injury, if there was a nerve injury or you had to sort of decompress the compartments and bring some stability back to that elbow. But I just see mischief from X-fix. People good, well-intentioned, but creating mischief.
So would you say categorically, right here, right now, never, ever put an X-fix on an elbow?
Except if it's vascular or compartment syndrome.
Vascular nerve.
Yeah.
Yeah, if there's no well-perfused arm, don't put an X-fix on it.
Okay.
No.
Thank you. You hit it here first.
Love it. Love it. Clear
With
instructions.
read the small print. Reviews are not my own.
Yeah. Orthohub has no affiliation with.
No, but I love that you said that, because we've I teach on a lot of X-fix courses where you go on and
There's always an elbow station.
There's always an elbow station where it's a spanning elbow. It's one of the X-fixes you put on, and it's the one X-fix where you know that inferior pin, wherever you put it, wherever you dial it, it's going to hit something.
There is a place you can put it, though, so to speak, is direct posterior. So everyone is scared to go through the triceps. A bit like when you're mobilizing a knee dislocation and it's for a short period of time. There's nothing wrong with you going just directly straight through the quads. I'm looking at Cash just to see if he's agreeing with
That's
that.
right, yeah.
I'm not liking that, but it's not the end of the world.
But I'd like that. If you came directly posteriorly through the triceps, and you can come down the back, through the triceps at the back, low down, and keep away from the radial nerve if you're in the midline at the back. But as soon as you come around, everyone thinks that they need to put those pins on the lateral side.
Yeah, they do.
And if you have a look at the three-dimensional structure of the elbow, it's like a really sharp point, isn't it?
Yes, it's a vicious edge.
Yeah,
it is.
Trying to get your pin to stick there, and then it slips off forward.
Yeah.
So you've sharp dissected, and I've seen that happen, and you've pulled the nerve around to the back of the pin. Then the elbow flexes, and then the radial nerve turns off. Mayo published 100 X-fixes, no nerve injury, and that's because they're Mayo, okay? Your average upper limb surgeon finds it difficult to put on an X-fix onto an elbow.
Okay.
And we're talking Cash here.
You go.
Can you tell us about elbow arthritis? So let's start with post-traumatic or idiopathic. So these are young people who've had. Sometimes it just comes on, but often it's I do a few medical reports. You often see these guys who've had injuries and they get post-traumatic osteoarthritis.
Was my name on any of these reports? just wink.
What are we doing for those guys? Because where are we with?
No good solutions for the arthritis in the relatively active male or female who wants to do heavy work on their elbow. There's no great solution. Elbow technology, I suppose, really hasn't grown much over the last 10, 15 years, and there's not a lot of companies who are spending a lot of money on the research. So we're still stuck at the sloppy hinge, maybe an unlinked that you can link.
It's just the elbow replacement's never going to be a big ticket item, is it?
No, but it's also such small interfaces and such big forces that you put through it. The twisting forces when you pick up a box, for example, you're putting a big twisting force across that humeral component, which is just basically a circle inside a rod. And so if you have an elbow replacement, you're lifting nothing heavier than 5 pounds in a single lift or 2 pounds repeatedly. And if you're a 45-year-old, 50-year-old male who wants to do any form of manual work, that elbow replacement will work loose within about 5 to 8 years. Yeah. So what you want to do is go back, and when you get, as much as I love girfed, but you want to get it right first time, so to try and avoid that arthritis if you can. If they've got the arthritis, then your solutions aren't great. Arthroplasty is not great in a relatively young patient. Fusion is, although underappreciated, I think, as an option, particularly if you're in your 20s or your 30s. It gives you a strong, stable elbow, gives you things that you can do. It's not too painful.
Do you do many fusions?
Probably about 1, maybe 2 every 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Not a lot.
It's not a lot, but it is an option.
It is an option.
Because it's something we don't really think about.
No. The interposition arthroplasties will buy you five years. That's putting some fascia around the joint surface.
Yeah.
That'll buy you 5 years. But the problem is it's plagued with instability. So you have this elbow that can move, it can flex and extend, but you can't put any force through it. It's all wobbly. It's no good to you.
So on that note, you've got a patient in clinic who's got a symptomatic elbow. What would you prefer? Do you find easier to treat? A slightly floppy elbow, a slightly unstable elbow, or a stiff elbow?
I'll go with a slightly stiff elbow. I think the patient would want a slightly stiff elbow. I think as a whole, if you've got a stiff, pain-free elbow, you can function pretty well. It's a bit like the scapulothoracic joint for the shoulder surgeons being your way out. Yeah, you can do a fair amount with as long as you've got a stable elbow. If you've got an unstable elbow that's floppy all over the place,
it's hopeless.
And if it's painful, that's really, really bad. That's the worst of all. So I'd rather have a slightly stiff elbow.
If we go moving away from arthritis, if we just talk about instability, so instability of the shoulder and the knee has got brilliant outcomes in elite athletes. You can get back to sport. I just remembered you don't like sport, but I was going to ask you about sport, high level sport in elbow trauma in setting of instability.
So if you have a simple dislocation,
sorry, before that, why don't you like sport?
Well, why would you? Honestly, why would you?
Because it's
online, free access. Watch out for
man
the
pushing
purchases.
himself. It's man pushing himself to the edge of his limit in a team environment. Against the elements, against an opponent, against a ball. It's one of the greatest struggles in man.
Where are the depleted uranium shells in a game of cricket?
So were you describing QuickyBaby there? Because that's all. Why are you saying that? That's all I heard. QuickyBaby with 10 friends, fighting together, chasing someone. Man.
Cardiovascular fitness, it is muscular endurance, it's vitamin D, it's bone profile.
How many people died in the London Marathon?
In the London Marathon?
How many people died in the London Marathon this year?
How many is it?
None this year. It didn't happen.
How's that?
Oh, they're sharp in London, aren't they? Hey, he thinks he's got me, doesn't he?
Next question.
I got me there. I'm buggered. No, true. But people have died playing World of Tanks, by the way. Yeah, man, it's so intense. Yeah, I'm sad. Google it.
So that's why sport is bad for you, as demonstrated there.
Emotional.
So sorry, Lee, we got distracted. We were talking about instability in elbow in athletes.
So if you have a simple dislocation, so there's no bone injury, you've only torn the ligaments, you haven't torn the common flex or common extensor joints, your prognosis is really, really good. You should get back to what you hoped to do before.
Okay.
Most simple dislocations will do really, really well with non-operative treatment.
Jackpot.
The only time you might want to reconstruct the MCL is if perhaps you're a goalkeeper or you're putting constant valgus stress across your elbow. Then you may go for an acute repair. But that's a real niche sort of market.
Baseball pitches, that kind of thing.
Yeah. They get the acute injuries. They do also get chronic rupture of the MCL, chronic stretching out of the MCL.
I mean, there's a whole industry of publications in the US about baseball pitchers' elbows, isn't there?
Yeah, but that's because they do. They put massive forces through those elbows. When you watch them on YouTube and the speeds that they're generating and again and again and again
100 plus miles an hour, repeatedly.
You could do it online. And,
Pete, have you got anything else you want to ask Lee?
But watch out for gnome lover.
Yeah, baby.
Just when you think you've got him.
Yeah. Dave, I think he's coming at you next.
Dave's looking nervous. Lee, it's been awesome having you. Thank you for coming and joining us.
Thank you so
today.
much, Lee.
It's been awesome. So before you go and catch a Hogwarts Express back to Cambridge, tell us, if people want to reach you, find out more about the work you're doing, or Cambridge Orthopaedics, how do they find you? How do they find out about Cambridge Orthopaedics?
www.cambridgeorthopaedics.com and just follow the links. You'll find us every morning, Thursdays at 7:30, Fridays at 7:30.
TNT and some of those other things you're doing.
Yeah, Fast and Furious approaches, of course, is on a Friday. I was watching one on the train coming up, learning about pelvic surgery.
Yeah. Didn't take long.
Oh, man. Jeez.
It's so dull, isn't it? So dull.
That is.
No,
I was sitting there sucking my polo.
The one thing that's been refreshing is, OrthoHub was very much set up to be a hub and a connector like this. It's not about, a couple of individuals taking the limelight. We really don't want to do that. It is very much sharing it. And it's been great seeing the stuff you, Neil Kang, have been working on up there. It's been really great to see. Mike's kind of been a bit of a bridge to there, and then also we've got and it's funny because there's a link now because Dad Chow's there, Jay Rawal's there, Stevie Mack. So there's a good bunch. Thank you very much, Lee. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Dave.
Cheers,
Thanks,
Dave.
Thank you,
Great
me.
job.
Thank you,
Hoxton Radio.
Thank you, me. I think that's everyone of value. Pete, do you want to tell the good people at home who's going to be our special guest on the next podcast?
Is it me?
No, it's not you.
Tim Briggs. Bit of a roasting last time on the the latest podcast. I don't know whether Tim's heard that or not. He probably doesn't have the time to listen to these things. We might be safe.
We might be safe, but if not, he's coming in the biggest tank you've ever seen.
He's coming in, yeah. He's coming in with his gold shells.
As that guy on The Wire used to say, she. Thank you very much, everyone. See you next Tuesday, Pete.
Cheers, mate.